It rises in memory like a steel colossus, stretching nearly the length of a city block and weighing as much as a small ship, built not for delicacy but for raw, unapologetic force. This machine, broad-shouldered, fire-hearted, has long been introduced as the most massive steam locomotive ever conceived. A creature that clawed its way over mountain ranges, sparked imaginations, and carved its silhouette into the cultural memory of American rail travel. But what if the legend you've been told for years is only half the truth? What if the story that surrounded this giant was shaped just as much by myth-making as by mechanics? Was it truly the champion of its class, or did the spectacle outshine the substance? Step past the glossy photographs, the collector shelves, the dramatic posters, and you'll find a tale layered with embellishment. Disagreements among engineers, and choices that some still call questionable. Born on the eve of a global war, this towering locomotive entered the scene just as the railroad world was preparing to transform forever. Stay with me through the end, because the final revelation might shift the way you see this iron titan for good. The crown for largest locomotive on Earth has never been a simple prize. Bring up this machine, and the first boast you'll hear is that it was the ultimate heavyweight in steam history. And yes, there's no denying its staggering dimensions, nearly 100 feet from coupler to coupler, running on an articulated wheel setup that looked more like mechanical artistry than engineering, and weighing well over 1,000,000 pounds with its tender brimful. But does that truly make it the supreme champion? Other behemoths roamed the rails as well, like the Yellowstone types on the Duluth, Misab and Iron Range Railway, which produced tractive force figures that rivaled or surpassed this giant. Those engines, built for unyielding ore service, boasted muscle that challenged the throne many assume was unquestioned. And then there was the Virginia's massive A units, part steam, part electric booster, machines whose output could go toe-to-toe with any ranking locomotive. So how did this creature of steel earn the title everyone repeats? The answer lies partly in engineering, but mostly in image. The railroad that owned it mastered the art of promotion, startling photographs that captured the enormity, bold descriptions that fired the imagination, and the unforgettable chalk-scrolled nickname that stuck like branding iron to steel. Dive deeper and the narrative becomes less clear. Size depends on what metric you choose to exalt. Length, power, speed, ability to grip rails, depending on the category, the hierarchy shifts. In the tournament of numbers, the legend is less absolute than it seems. Its claimed top velocity is another point wrapped in fog. Official declarations insist this massive locomotive could sprint at 80 miles per hour, a mind-bending speed for something that outweighed an entire freight consist. But did that ever truly happen out on the open line? Records providing hard proof simply do not exist. Experts of the era, those who knew the limitations of heavy steam machinery, argued that hitting such velocity in service would have been improbable at best. Even under perfect conditions, downhill with luck and momentum on its side, the locomotive might have brushed into the upper 60s or just grazed 70. Beyond that, the weight, the expansion gear, the strain on the running gear all imposed limits that made higher speeds risky. Besides, this machine wasn't conceived as a speed demon. It was forged to drag brutal tonnage over some of the most unforgiving grades in the region. In that harsh environment, brute strength outweighed the glamour of velocity. The 80 miles per hour figure, some say, lived only on test sheets, unloaded, straight-track laboratory conditions. Maybe one unit approached it once, maybe twice, but such glimpses were not the reality of day-to-day operation. It's like claiming a race car can hit an astronomical number on a perfect dyno, but rarely touches it on an actual circuit. The number dazzles, but doesn't depict the truth on the ground. And that's a recurring theme with this Iron Monarch statistics crafted to impress. Even if the lived experience told another story, if there was one feat this locomotive mastered without dispute, it was consuming resources at a staggering pace. Fuel and water vanished into its firebox and boiler with astonishing speed. A dozen tons of coal and tens of thousands of gallons of water could disappear over a stretch that modern locomotives would handle with a fraction of the appetite. Each run demanded meticulously placed servicing points, water towers, coal docks, crews ready to replenish what the engine devoured. Despite its intimidating reputation, its combustion setup wasn't revolutionary. It relied on straightforward coal-firing mechanisms, part manual, part mechanical, but hardly cutting edge. Meanwhile, diesel-electric power was just beginning its ascent. Those new machines demanded less attention, fewer stops, smaller crews, and could run farther without refueling. They offered comparable or superior performance while costing far less to operate. The steam giant might have been magnificent, but efficient. Not remotely. It was heavy, thirsty, maintenance, hungry, a symbol of overwhelming force, but hardly a practical long-term solution for a country shifting toward modern freight movement. Picture trying to haul commerce using a creature that devours its own weight in resources every time it turns a wheel. Strength alone isn't enough when the cost of maintaining that strength becomes untenable. And its operating expenses weren't merely high, they were monumental. Running a steam locomotive of any size was already demanding, but this one existed in a category beyond ordinary challenges. It required a full team: engineers, firemen, assistants, support crews, just to keep it functioning safely. Daily inspections were mandatory. Every joint, every driving rod, every pivot point in the articulation had to be checked. Valves, brake systems, boiler pressures all needed constant attention. Even small issues could cascade into major failures. And the infrastructure burden was immense. Tracks had to be strengthened to support its dominating weight, and curvature needed to accommodate its long wheelbase. Servicing routes required precisely spaced support facilities. Then the diesel era arrived, bringing locomotives that cost less, weighed less, used fewer resources, and demanded minimal upkeep. The machine that once symbolized triumph slowly shifted into a financial liability. A towering irony of railroad history emerged. The locomotive, designed to conquer the toughest terrain, was ultimately defeated by economics. Music. Its timing couldn't have been worse. Imagine investing enormous sums into a groundbreaking mechanical marvel, only to discover within a few years that the world had already pivoted to a new technological direction. That was the fate of this massive engine. Designed at the dawn of the 1940s and entering service just as global conflict pushed industries into overdrive, it initially seemed like the heroic answer to mountainous challenges. But while it thundered into service, another revolution was quietly arriving: the rise of diesel-electric power. Those engines, lighter, simpler, more flexible, were poised to sweep the nation's railroads. In just a small handful of years, they transformed the landscape. Steam, despite its historic prestige, was losing ground rapidly. This monumental locomotive, despite its engineering excellence, was born at the twilight of its era. It never truly had the opportunity to demonstrate its full potential, because the future was already barreling down the track in another form. It was as if someone unveiled a masterfully crafted propeller plane the same year jet engines took to the sky. No matter how perfectly built the old technology was, the horizon had changed, and the future wasn't waiting. And here we reach a question that has stirred debate for decades. Was it even necessary? Even during its original service life, engineers argued fiercely about the concept behind it. Some believed in the Vision One giant locomotive replacing several smaller ones. Others insisted that multiple efficient engines would be more flexible, cheaper to run, and far easier to maintain. Real-world operations sided with the skeptics. Yes, the huge engine could eliminate the need for helpers on steep grades, but the price was staggering. Massive fuel consumption, costly upkeep, increased infrastructure needs. And when the engine failed, everything came to a grinding halt. Smaller locomotives offered resilience. If one dropped out, the others kept the train moving. The diesel revolution eventually proved this point emphatically. The dream of a single mechanical titan began to look less like innovation and more like overconfidence in brute force. Many experts now view the machine as both marvel and miscalculation, impressive to behold, but excessive, expensive, and strategically flawed. The debate only intensified when the restored Titan returned to modern rails decades after retirement. The year it rolled out again, Crowds gathered along fences, overpasses, and open plains, waiting for a glimpse of the enormous silhouette they knew only from hazy photos and nostalgic tales. As the revived machine exhaled steam and surged forward once more, the public reaction was immediate astonishment, pride, even tears from those who had dreamed of seeing a creature from another era revived. Yet behind the celebrations, questions formed quickly. Preservationists and engineers whispered that the revival was less a resurrection of history and more an elaborate showcase. Upgrades, some subtle, some substantial, sparked arguments about authenticity. Modern components replaced outdated parts. Safety systems were altered. Electronic controls crept into places where only metal and heat once ruled. Purists insisted that the machine had transformed into something else entirely, that it no longer reflected its true mechanical soul. Safety experts raised concerns too. A locomotive of this size on contemporary infrastructure designed around lighter, more predictable equipment brought real risks. Tracks that once supported giants now hosted streamlined engines with vastly different weight distributions and stresses. Yet none of those arguments stopped the lines of people who traveled hundreds of miles just to witness the apparition of steam returning to life. The sight of that immense drive gear churning across amber fields felt like witnessing a prehistoric animal brought back from extinction. Both awe and tension wove through the moment, a reminder that even legends reborn can spark controversy. For all its complications, the machine has become an unmistakable symbol. Even people who have never stepped near a rail yard recognize its silhouette or its name stamped on posters, scale models, and museum banners. It represents not simply a locomotive, but an entire era of ambition, an age when engineers dared to build machines that pushed the limits of material, skill, and imagination. Yet in actual performance, this giant did not always surpass its peers. Others were more powerful. Others were faster. Others were more efficient or required fewer repairs. Its operational life, while significant, did not stretch endlessly. It served for a couple of decades before retirement, a modest span compared to workhorses that lasted twice as long in simpler duties. But what it lacked in longevity or objective superiority, it compensated for with presence. There was something about the thunder of its wheels, the hypnotic rhythm of its pistons working like iron lungs, the billowing storm of smoke that poured from its stack and smeared the sky behind it. It didn't just move freight. It moved imaginations. And sometimes that is enough to secure a place in memory that no statistic can dislodge. The giants of machinery that endure in public consciousness are rarely the most efficient. They are the ones that leave an imprint on anyone who witnesses them, machines that resonate through the decades long after their bolts cool. But the most revealing truth about this locomotive is this: it did not achieve legendary status during its lifetime. While in active service, it was seen by many railroad workers as temperamental, unwieldy, and expensive. Its maintenance crews grappled with constant inspections, repairs, and the heavy toll of wear from hauling extreme loads. It was admired, yes, but primarily for its force, not its elegance or efficiency. Only after it vanished from the rails did its reputation begin to transform. Photographs that once felt ordinary became precious artifacts. Memories from former engineers evolved into stories tinged with reverence. The absence of the machine created a longing that reshaped how the public viewed it. The steam era itself became romanticized, cast in warm tones by enthusiasts who never experienced the heat, grime, and labor it demanded. The locomotive, freed from the burdens of real-world costs and limitations, evolved into an icon. It became less about what it had accomplished and more about what it represented, a symbol of mechanical audacity. In an age that has mostly left such audacity behind, its flaws softened over time, replaced by admiration for its scale and the boldness it embodied. Music, as enthusiasts continued to debate its legacy, the locomotive remained a subject of technical fascination and emotional devotion. Some saw it as an apex of steam technology, an awe-inspiring culmination of engineering might. Others viewed it as the pinnacle of impracticality, an extravagant detour on the path towards streamlined diesel progress. Yet what remained undeniable was the emotional charge it carried. When it roared down the tracks once again after restoration, people of all ages lined up along rural roads and small-town crossings. They held cameras, waved flags, lifted children onto their shoulders so they could witness history breathe. Drones followed high above, capturing the sweeping motion of the engine making its way across fields, towns, and mountainsides. The footage spread instantly across the internet, uniting viewers who felt a rush of connection to something larger than themselves. Even people who had never cared about trains before found themselves transfixed by the sight. The sheer physicality of the machine dwarfed modern locomotives, its length stretching on seemingly forever, its 8 massive drivers at each articulation pounding the rails in a rhythm that echoed across the landscape. The effect was hypnotic, almost primal, tapping into a collective memory of the industrial age when machinery felt alive. The deeper truth is that the locomotive's story mirrors the human tendency to elevate the extraordinary, even when it has imperfections. The giant was not flawless, far from it. It was costly, complicated, and quickly overtaken by more efficient designs. Yet people gravitate toward machines that defy modesty, machines that strike the imagination with sheer audacity. There is a powerful allure in something that refuses to be subtle. And this locomotive, with its towering boiler, immense wheels, and roaring breath of steam, was anything but subtle. It was the embodiment of mechanical bravado. In the world of engineering, greatness is often measured in precise metrics: horsepower, speed, fuel consumption, cost effectiveness. But in the world of storytelling, greatness is measured differently. It is measured by the feeling a machine evokes when you see it emerge through a cloud of steam, sunlight catching the edges of its steel plates, the ground trembling under your feet. This locomotive possessed that rare ability. It may not have broken every technical record, but it carved its place into the emotional landscape of generations, and so its legacy endures, a paradox of power and inefficiency, brilliance and burden. It stands as a testament to an era when machines were not simply tools but monuments. The giant reminds us that sometimes the machines we cherish most are those that reflect the ambitions of the people who built them. They symbolize daring, ingenuity, and the refusal to accept limitations. The locomotive's myth was forged not only in the firebox, but in the imaginations of those who watched it climb impossible grades and vanish into the horizon, leaving behind a trail of smoke that curled upward like a signature written across the sky.